Have you ever misjudged someone and only realized it when it was too late to take the words back? He was a powerful investor, polished and proud. She was just a woman in the crowd, or so he thought. When Cole Waverly looked at Harper Lennox for the first time, he didn't see her strength, her story, or the quiet empire she had built. All he saw was someone beneath his league. But what happens when the person you overlook turns out to be everything you needed, and more? What if your pride cost you the one soul who didn't want anything from you? Accept honesty, and if you had the chance to choose again, not with words, but with silence, with patience, with presence, would you still walk away? Or finally sit beside someone who never needed you to be impressive, just real? This is not a love story full of fireworks. It's a quiet reckoning, a slow burn, a second chance that didn't come with fanfare but with folded letters, quiet benches, and unspoken healing. If you've ever loved late, learned slow, or lost someone before truly seeing them, this story is for you. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Let's begin. The ballroom shimmered like something out of a forgotten dream. Warm amber lights poured down from chandeliers the size of small cars, casting soft halos on polished shoes and sequined dresses. A string quartet whispered Vivaldi from the corner. It wasn't just a fundraiser. It was a showcase of power quiet, deliberate, and wrapped in manners as smooth as the champagne. Cole Waverly arrived 10 minutes late, as always. He liked the effect. Walking into a room after everyone else had settled gave him an advantage, a chance to be noticed without effort. His suit was custom-tailored in navy wool, sharp enough to cut glass. His silver cufflinks caught the light just enough to suggest restraint, not flash. Everything about him was precise, controlled, expected. People moved aside as he passed, heads tilted. Smiles stretched. He nodded at no one in particular. He wasn't here to support the Children's Literacy Fund. He was here because his firm, Waverly Tech Holdings, had just hit a record valuation. Appearances mattered, especially now. Deals were made in whispers, not pitches. Reputations, not proposals. He accepted a drink from a passing tray without looking, then paused near the registration table, more out of instinct than intention. And that's when he saw her. She wasn't wearing sequins, not even jewelry. Just a plain black dress, with sleeves to the elbow and a square neckline that felt more like defiance than fashion. Her brown hair was loose, not styled. No bold lipstick, no sparkle. Just calm eyes and a voice so soft it made people lean in to hear her. She was helping an older man navigate the donation portal on his phone. Her patience wasn't performative. It was practiced. Cole tilted his head. Unfamiliar. Interesting. He stepped closer, not because he planned to, but because something in the air around her felt quieter, realer. Volunteering or managing the whole show, he asked casually, taking a sip. She didn't look up immediately. She finished explaining the last step to the gentleman, smiled, then turned to him. Volunteering, she said simply. I help organize this event every year. I would have remembered you, he said, tone light, polished. Then maybe, she said, her voice even. You weren't really paying attention. He blinked, not out of offense, out of surprise. She hadn't said it with edge, just truth. I'm Cole Waverly, he said, offering his hand. I know, she replied, shaking it briefly, her grip neither firm nor limp. And I'm Harper, just Harper, he asked, eyebrow lifting. That's all that matters, she said, eyes not moving. He let out a short breath through his nose. Do you always talk like that? Only when I'm bored. That one hit deeper than he expected. He leaned slightly on the edge of the table, trying to recalibrate. There's a rooftop bar upstairs, he offered. Decent view of the Hudson. Join me for one drink. She glanced at the clock above the ballroom entrance, then back at him. I don't drink with people I don't know. You know my name, he said with a hint of a grin. I said I knew of you. That's not the same. He paused. The room didn't feel so warm anymore. And then without planning it, without filtering, he said it. Well, I don't date below my league. It slipped out like a joke, but it wasn't funny, not even to him. She didn't flinch, didn't roll her eyes, just looked at him for a second that felt longer than it was. That's a shame, Harper said softly, because I don't date people who rank others. She turned, adjusted a stack of envelopes, and walked away, quiet, effortless, like someone who knew exactly where she was going. Cole stood there, silent, for the first time in years. Maybe. The hum of the room resumed around him. But something in him didn't. Cole Waverly left the ballroom early that night. Not dramatically, he didn't storm out or slam a glass down. He just slipped away, coat over his shoulder, hands in his pockets, walking down Park Avenue like the wind had gone out of the city. The thing was, he'd been rejected before, plenty of times. Some women said no, some ghosted. Some liked the game more than the player. But this was different. Harper hadn't rejected him. She had rejected his way of seeing the world. It unsettled him. He got home to his penthouse on the Upper West Side, tossed his jacket on the arm of the leather couch, and sat down without turning on the lights. The room was all floor-to-ceiling glass, offering a postcard view of the city. But tonight, it felt like he was watching someone else's life from the outside. Her words echoed, as quiet as they were. I don't date people who rank others. Who even said something like that? She didn't sound angry. She wasn't trying to impress him. She had just said it and walked away. No drama. No need to win the moment. That was the part that got to him. Because Cole was used to reading people, numbers, markets. Yes, but people especially. Give him 5 minutes, and he could tell if someone was bluffing, begging, or aiming to impress. But Harper. She gave him nothing. No social signals, no smirk or sarcasm. Just that one line that somehow unraveled the carefully stitched suit of his confidence. The next morning, he Googled her. Harper, Aldridge Charity Gala, registration volunteer, black dress. Nothing. He dug deeper, checked the event page, committee photos, staff lists. Her name didn't appear anywhere. No LinkedIn, no social media, no photos and gala albums. It was like she hadn't just vanished, but like she had never wanted to be found in the first place. And that was rare. In his world, visibility was currency. People paid PR firms to build personal brands. They tweeted, posted, spoke on panels. Even charity was something to be seen doing. But Harper, she had worked that entire night, folding napkins, guiding guests, helping donors with tech issues, no name badge, no thank you speech. She had vanished into the very work she showed up to do. Cole sat back in his chair, staring at the blank search bar. Who was she? He wasn't used to mystery. Mystery wasn't efficient, but this didn't feel like a game. This felt like someone who knew how to disappear without running, someone who had mastered the art of being present without being visible. The following week, Cole found himself thinking about her in the oddest moments. In the middle of a strategy meeting, when someone pitched a startup with aspirational luxury branding, he thought of Harper's unbranded black dress. At a fundraising dinner where every other guest posted selfies with their name tags, he remembered how she hadn't even worn one. During a photo shoot for a business magazine, when they asked him to look more authentic, he had to bite his tongue to keep from laughing. Authentic, like Harper, who had nothing to prove and proved everything. Late one night, standing on his balcony with the city humming below, Cole asked himself something he hadn't in years. What would it feel like to not be noticed and not care to exist in a room not as the center, but as the quiet constant, to be so whole within yourself that you didn't need to win anyone over? That's what Harper had. That quiet power, that unshakable presence, that soft voice that made louder ones sound hollow. He didn't know her story. Not yet. But he knew that she had chosen stillness in a world addicted to noise, and that, somehow, was the most unforgettable thing about her. It was the silence that stayed with him, not the ballroom, not the rejection, not even the sharp tug of pride unraveling at its seams. It was the silence that followed the one Harper Lennox left behind when she walked away. A silence that didn't feel cold, but complete. Cole Waverly found himself waking earlier than usual that week. not out of obligation, but restlessness. He'd stare at the ceiling of his modern bedroom, the gray of dawn barely creeping in through blackout curtains, and replay that moment in his head. Not her words, but her tone, measured, grounded, like someone who had said those things before, not in anger, but as a truth she'd already lived. By Wednesday, he was standing in his office at Waverly Tower, staring out over the city and ignoring the notifications buzzing on his tablet. Memos, updates, deals that once consumed his attention now felt distant. Daniel, he called. His assistant appeared within seconds. I need a list of everyone who worked the Aldridge Gala last weekend. Not the attendees, the volunteers, staff, organizers. Daniel blinked. Any specific reason? Cole didn't look away from the window. Just curiosity. It wasn't just curiosity, and they both knew it. By Friday, Daniel returned with a slim folder. Not much, he said. Some people used first names only. A few were added last minute. He laid down a single page. At the bottom, in faint typewritten font, H. Lennox, Logistics Coordination. Unofficial. Unofficial, Cole asked. Daniel nodded. Apparently she wasn't on payroll, not even on the volunteer forms. Showed up early, stayed late, didn't sign in, but everyone said the event wouldn't have run without her. Cole traced the name with his eyes. H. Lennox, no address, no contact, just the echo of a name not meant to be followed. But he followed it anyway. A search for Harper Lennox turned up almost nothing. No Instagram, no Twitter, no company bios. One blurry panel photo from 5 years ago where a woman stood at the edge of a group, half turned away from the camera. He enlarged it, the cheekbone, the line of her jaw, the softness of her eyes. It was her. No caption, no title, no tags. Just a woman standing in the shadows of her own achievements. Most people curated their lives now. They lived in filters, posted their wins. Harper had opted out of the narrative altogether, and that made her unforgettable. That weekend, Cole drove upstate, not for a meeting, not for a retreat, just to get out of the noise. He checked into a quiet inn with no doorman, no bellhop, and no business center. He needed the stillness, needed to understand why someone like Harper haunted him in a way boardroom rivalries never could. He walked through the woods that afternoon, boots crunching on leaves, breath visible in the cool air. His thoughts wandered back to his mother, Sylvia Waverly, once a respected investor, thoughtful, brave. Too trusting. She'd lost everything after a betrayal by someone she'd built her first fund with. Her name, dragged through the press. Cole was 17. He remembered how she stopped wearing heels, stopped going to events, how she let her garden grow wild because tending to it meant believing the future still mattered. He never forgot. That's when he decided never be blindsided again. Read people like quarterly reports. Use trust as a negotiation tactic, not a foundation. But Harper had undone all of that. With a glance, with a line, with her silence. Because it wasn't defensive. It wasn't guarded. It was chosen. She didn't need to speak to be heard. She didn't need attention to have presence. She was the kind of person who could change the temperature of a room without raising her voice. And he wasn't sure whether he wanted to chase her or become someone worthy of standing beside her. Back at the inn that evening, he sat in the corner of a quiet dining room with a mug of black coffee and a yellow notepad. No laptop, no schedule, just pen and paper. At the top, he wrote, "What do I want people to see when they see me?" Then paused. Because for the first time, he realized maybe he didn't know. Cole Waverly didn't believe in fate. He believed in timing, leverage, and making your own chances. But when he walked into the Marlowe Investment Forum 3 weeks later, he felt something he couldn't quite name, like the air had shifted just slightly. He wasn't supposed to stay long, just a quick appearance, a nod to presence. The event was small, quiet, invite only. No press, no panels with clickbait titles. Just the kind of space where real decisions started behind the scenes. The agenda was printed on thick ivory cardstock, minimalist and understated. He flipped through without much interest until a name caught his eye. Harper Lennox, representative, the Lennox Trust. He blinked. stared again. It couldn't be. He checked the bio. Harper Lennox is the founder and lead strategist of the Lennox Trust, an anonymous equity initiative focused on education access and ethical capital distribution. There was no photo, no flashy credentials, just a list of community grants, high-impact silent partnerships, and a note that the organization had never accepted media interviews. He folded the program slowly. A few minutes later, a woman stepped out onto the stage. No dramatic lighting, no applause. She didn't wear heels, didn't scan the room for approval. Her blouse was white, pants gray, hair pulled back in a loose twist. There were no earrings, no name tag. But it was her, Harper. And she stood like she belonged there, not out of arrogance, but out of clarity. She wasn't looking for permission. She was simply ready. "Thank you," she began, voice steady. "We don't brand our investments. We don't measure success in headlines. At the Lennox Trust, we look for what lives quietly, schools overlooked, women rebuilding, communities no longer trending." Her words were plain, almost too plain. But somehow, every sentence hit like a stone skipping across still water, simple at first, then rippling wider with each pause. Invisibility, she continued, isn't always a disadvantage. It can be strategy. It can be refuge. It can be power. When no one's watching, we listen better, we learn more, and we make fewer promises we can't keep. The room was dead silent. Cole had been in hundreds of rooms like this, rooms full of people used to commanding attention, rooms where people performed intelligence more than they lived it, but no one was performing here. Harper wasn't trying to inspire. She wasn't trying to dazzle. She was offering truth, like a stone in your palm, unshiny, but solid. She clicked to the next slide, a spreadsheet of microgrants. No totals, no logos. Just names of initiatives, rural tutoring, mobile libraries, trauma counseling for teen girls, elder tech literacy. It wasn't a pitch. It was a record of care. And Cole, sitting near the back, felt something unfamiliar. He forgot to measure her, forgot to assess. He just listened. When she finished, there was no Q&A. She didn't linger, just closed her laptop, nodded politely, and exited stage left, disappearing behind a plain black curtain. Cole didn't move for a full minute, because in that moment, something shifted in him. He realized Harper wasn't just interesting. She was undeniable, but in a way that didn't need him to notice. She had built something that didn't require applause. And he wasn't sure what startled him more, that she'd done all of it without him ever hearing her name, or that he had nothing to offer her she hadn't already built for herself. Cole Waverly had built an empire on decisiveness. Decide fast, act faster, don't look back. But for the first time in a long time, he couldn't make up his mind about something as simple as walking into a meeting. He stood outside the glass doors of his own conference room, watching his executive team shuffle papers, adjust ties, open laptops. They were waiting for him. Usually, that gave him energy. Today, it made his chest feel tight, because after watching Harper Lennox on that stage, measured, calm, powerful in her restraint, he couldn't stop hearing her voice. Not the words exactly, but the way she sounded, like she didn't owe anyone anything, like she had nothing to prove, and so, everything she said mattered more. Cole took a breath, pushed the door open, and walked in. He sat through the meeting, nodded in the right places, approved the necessary documents, but his mind wasn't there. It was still at that quiet forum, in a room where a woman with no title had taught a lesson more profound than any market trend. That evening, after everyone left, Cole stayed behind. His office was high above the skyline, the kind of place people dreamed about having meetings in. Glass walls, curated art, a view of Central Park so clear it looked like a painting. But tonight, it felt cold. He poured himself a drink, just one, and sat at the end of the long walnut table, usually reserved for clients. No screen, no phone, just stillness. He looked down at his hands, then around the room, then at himself, reflected in the window, city lights flickering across his face. What am I doing? The question came without ceremony, but with surprising weight. He thought about the companies he'd funded, some life-changing, some just cash cows. The people he'd mentored, some who flourished, others who disappeared into the dust of the industry. And he thought about the awards, the magazine covers, the panels where he'd spoken about innovation and future-proofing and strategic scalability. It all sounded so hollow now, because in that conference room where Harper had presented, there had been no pitch, just presence. She hadn't talked about scale. She talked about stories, people, futures that no one bothered to bet on. She had chosen obscurity on purpose, not as a fear of failure, but as protection of purpose. And what had he chosen? Visibility. Yes, recognition, always. But what did it serve, beyond his own image? The silence in the office grew louder. He stood up, walked over to the credenza, pulled open the drawer where he kept a few things he never showed anyone: personal files, mementos, a photo of his mother. He hadn't looked at it in years. Sylvia Waverly, a woman who once trusted too deeply and lost everything when a partner in her first investment firm forged her signature on a deal that spiraled into scandal. Cole had watched her fall apart slowly, not in public breakdowns, but in quiet withdrawals. She stopped playing piano, stopped laughing at old movies. She became cautious, measured, not bitter but sad in ways she never said aloud. Cole learned early people will betray you. Get ahead before they do. Be the one with leverage. But now, maybe that wasn't strength. Maybe it was fear. He sat back down and closed his eyes, and for the first time in a decade, let himself feel small, not weak, just not finished. The next morning, Cole did something strange. He left his phone at home, took the subway, not the car, stopped at a diner he hadn't been to in years, sat in a corner booth and ordered black coffee with eggs over easy and wheat toast. No assistant, no email, no one snapping photos, just steam rising from ceramic, and the sound of forks tapping plates. A man across from him, gray beard, union jacket, looked up and gave a polite nod. Cole nodded back. Nobody cared who he was here. Nobody was watching, and it felt right. After breakfast, he took a walk. No destination, just sidewalks and sky, letting his thoughts untangle one step at a time. By the time he reached the edge of Bryant Park, he realized something. He didn't need to win Harper over. He needed to understand her. And maybe, just maybe, that started by letting go of who he thought he had to be. He didn't send flowers. He didn't show up unannounced or deliver some grand speech. Instead, Cole Waverly sat down at his desk late one Thursday night, pulled out a pen, the real kind, with ink and weight, and wrote something he hadn't written in over a decade. A letter, not an email, not a typed apology dressed up in executive tone. A real letter. He didn't plan it, didn't draft it 12 times. He just wrote, slowly, carefully, letting each word find its breath before the next followed. Harper, I don't know what you think of me, and I'm not asking to change that. I just want to say one thing. I'm not sorry you're successful. I'm not sorry you turned me down. I'm sorry I didn't recognize you were a whole person when I first spoke to you. That's on me. No name, no number, no signature. He folded it. No envelope. Just paper. Honest. The next day, he had it delivered quietly to the office listed on the Lennox Trust's filing address. It wasn't some glass tower downtown, just a modest brick building tucked between a local cafe and a bookstore in Soho. No signage, no fanfare, just a doorbell and a narrow mailbox slot. He gave it to the receptionist. Personal message. He said simply, no rush, no reply needed. Then he left. Harper Lennox returned late that evening after a long day meeting with nonprofit educators from the Midwest. Her team had already gone. The office was still, the kind of stillness she loved. She walked through the quiet space, her heels soft on hardwood, stopping only when she saw the folded paper on her desk. No envelope, no note attached. She opened it cautiously, expecting another vendor, another pitch, another formality. But this wasn't any of those things. As her eyes scanned the words, something subtle shifted in her expression. No name, no apology laced with justification, just truth. And the strangest thing, she didn't feel angry. She hadn't felt angry that night at the gala either. She had felt disappointed, but not in Cole Waverly, in the way powerful people always assumed someone else wanted their power. She had spent years protecting herself from people who tried to reduce her, to her numbers, to her face, to what she could give them, or what she refused to. But this wasn't a plea. It was an offering, quiet, unfinished, and, for once, not demanding. Harper folded the letter again and placed it gently in the corner of her desk. She didn't smile, didn't frown, just sat down, removed her shoes, and let herself be still. For the first time in months, she didn't check her email. She didn't plan the next 5 days. She just stared out the window at the glow of the bookstore sign across the street and allowed the silence to be something different tonight. Not armor, not escape, just peace. That weekend. Harper visited the small community library she'd been helping quietly for years. The librarian, an older woman with silver-streaked hair and wide-lens glasses, waved from behind the desk. "Same shelf?" she asked with a grin. Harper nodded and walked toward the corner where the biographies lived. She liked real stories, not glossy ones, not curated accounts of success, but the slow, uncertain stories of people who failed quietly, learned slowly, and loved imperfectly. As she pulled out a worn copy of ThThe, The World Will Be Saved by Beauty, a thought crossed her mind. What if Cole hadn't meant to hurt her? What if he was just another person, shaped by a world that taught boys to measure worth before understanding value? And what if, just maybe, his silence now meant he was finally learning the difference? She didn't know. She wasn't ready to find out. But for the first time, she didn't feel the need to retreat when she thought of him, because something in that letter felt like it had been written, not to get close, but to step back, to make space, to say, "I see you now, even if you never look back." The news broke on a Tuesday morning, not in a tabloid, not through gossip, but in a polished, credible, and brutal article on the Financial Ledger, a trusted source read by every investor, analyst, and executive across the country. Montgomery Ventures Eyes, strategic stake in the Lennox Trust. Cole Waverly read the headline in disbelief. His coffee went cold on the conference room table as he scrolled through paragraphs he hadn't authorized, words he hadn't spoken, and strategies he hadn't drafted. The article was too specific to be speculative. It cited anonymous sources. It listed potential terms of a partnership, clauses involving data integration, shared ed tech infrastructure, early-stage co-investment pipelines. Worse, it framed the move as part of a long-game acquisition strategy, a slow, quiet takeover. Cole's hands tightened around the tablet. He looked up at Daniel, who had just walked in. "Did you see this?" Cole asked, voice low but sharp. Daniel nodded. "It's everywhere. Analysts are already projecting a Q3 spike if the deal's real." "It's not real," Cole said. "We've never proposed a merger, not a clause, not a memo." "Where the hell did this come from?" Daniel hesitated. "There was a draft presentation your strategic team built last quarter, pure hypotheticals, internal only. Someone must have leaked it." Cole's jaw clenched. The idea of merging with Harper's Trust had been floated once in a whiteboard session. It was dismissed immediately. She'd made it clear no consolidation, no dilution of mission, no compromises. And now, this. Within the hour, the article had been shared on every platform from Forbes to Tech Equity Weekly. By noon, Harper Lennox had already read it. She was in the middle of reviewing scholarship applications when her assistant slid the tablet across the desk, face pale. "You need to see this." Harper clicked the link. At first, her eyes moved calmly across the screen. But then, as each sentence confirmed her deepest suspicion, something changed in her breath. She sat still, not frozen, just quiet. The kind of quiet that comes before a door shuts. It wasn't just that Cole's firm was named. It was the language, the phrasing of strategic positioning, the suggestion of phased influence, the illusion of partnership wrapped in a chokehold. It felt familiar. Too familiar. She had been here before. 10 years ago. She had trusted someone with access, shared her vision, allowed alignment, and watched it turn into assimilation. Her company nearly devoured, her name nearly erased. Back then, She fought back with fire. This time, she didn't shout. She didn't send a warning. She simply opened her inbox and typed one email. Subject: withdrawal from National Education Collaboration Cole. Effective immediately. The Lennox Trust is withdrawing from the AI Education Pilot Initiative. All completed deliverables will be submitted. No statement will be made to the press. Harper Lennox. She hit send, closed her laptop, and didn't cry. She just sat in the silence she had once learned to love, not as peace, but as self-defense. Across the city. Cole stared at the email. He read it once, then again, then a third time. No accusations, no fury, just an ending. Daniel stood behind him, stunned. She's pulling out completely. Cole didn't answer. He just nodded once slowly, like swallowing a stone. Daniel started pacing. You should release a counterstatement. Push the truth. Deny the story. Show the timeline. Make it clear we never know, Cole said, quietly. Daniel stopped. What do you mean no? I mean don't. His voice didn't rise, but it was solid. If I talk now, it'll sound like spin, and she'll never believe me. She already thinks you lied. I didn't lie, Cole whispered, more to himself than anyone else. But truth wasn't the only thing that mattered now. It was how it looked, how it felt, and to Harper, it felt like betrayal. That was enough. That night, Harper sat on the rooftop of her apartment building. The city pulsed below, honking, glowing, full of people with somewhere to go. But she didn't move, didn't speak. Didn't even replay the letter he'd sent her just days earlier, because in the end, words weren't promises. They were paper. And this wasn't just business. This was a lesson she had already learned once and vowed never to repeat. The higher someone climbed in her world, the more quietly they learned to deceive. She had seen it all, except something about Cole had felt different. She had wanted to believe, and maybe that's what hurt most. Not the article, not the headlines, but the hope that, just this once, someone might not be pretending. The press waited for a statement. They waited for Cole Waverly to deny, to clarify, to control the narrative the way powerful men usually do. They expected a polished video, a firm handshake in a staged setting, words like miscommunication or unintentional leak, or a shared commitment to transparency, but none came. 3 days passed. The media cycle spun itself dizzy with theories. Speculations bloomed like weeds. Some claimed the Lennox Trust had overreacted. Others hinted that the merger was always the plan. But Cole said nothing, no press release, no rebuttal, no behind-the-scenes calls to editors. Instead, he called a meeting one that surprised even his closest staff. Montgomery Ventures is withdrawing from the National Education Initiative, he said calmly. Silence fell over the boardroom. His legal team exchanged nervous glances. Cole, one of them began, this will look like an admission of guilt. You don't need to. I'm not doing it to protect my image, he interrupted. Daniel, standing quietly at the back, understood before anyone else. You're doing it to protect hers, he said. Cole didn't respond, but the quiet in his eyes said yes. Later that afternoon, a single-page statement appeared on Montgomery Ventures' website. Plain white background, no logo, no CEO headshot, no executive summary. Statement. Regarding the AI education collaboration, Montgomery Ventures has officially withdrawn from the National Education Initiative. We believe that trust is the foundation of any partnership. Once that foundation is questioned, no contract can repair it. We wish all continued success to the Lennox Trust and its vital mission. That was it. No spin, no defense, no attempt to control the damage. The industry didn't know what to do with it. Some called it weak, others called it rare, but Harper Lennox read it in complete silence. She sat alone in the corner cafe 2 blocks from her office, the one she always went to after difficult days, a cup of jasmine tea growing cool in her hand, her eyes on the screen. She read the statement twice, then just sat there, still, heavy, not with anger, but something stranger, uncertainty. Because this wasn't what people like Cole Waverly did. People like him didn't retreat, they pivoted. They redirected. They buried the truth in better headlines. But this was a surrender of control, a relinquishing of public narrative, and it shook something in her, not enough to forgive, but enough to question if she had been wrong, even just a little. That night, Cole walked out of his building with no entourage, no car waiting, no tie. He declined every interview request, didn't respond to text messages from reporters or investors. He didn't explain himself at the gala events or issue follow-ups. He simply disappeared from the spotlight. And for the first time, he realized something unexpected. He didn't miss being seen. He missed being clear about his choices, about what mattered, about how easily power could be mistaken for value. He spent the following weeks in quiet places, libraries, schools, community centers, not speaking, just listening. To teachers explaining how underfunded classrooms stretched one set of books across 5 students. To parents sharing how they taught themselves code just to help their kids navigate online learning. To teenagers who had ideas but no mentors, no networks, no belief they were worth investing in. And he remembered what Harper had said in that panel. When no one's watching, we listen better. She had been right. Harper didn't reach out. Not in a week, not in 2. She continued her work as always, measured, focused, behind the curtain. But something small began to change. At the end of long meetings, she found herself pausing before closing her laptop, glancing at the drawer where that folded letter still rested. She hadn't thrown it away. She hadn't kept it for sentiment. She just hadn't moved it. And now, every time her eyes passed over it, she felt something tighten in her chest. Not pain, not longing, just a quiet thought she hadn't allowed herself to finish. Maybe he meant it. It happened by accident. Harper Lennox wasn't looking for him. She hadn't Googled his name, hadn't checked headlines. She had, in fact, made a conscious effort to keep her life free of Cole Waverly's presence. But fate, as it often does, had other plans. She was researching digital literacy programs for underserved youth, preparing a funding strategy for inner-city schools. It was late. The office was quiet. Her assistant had gone home. The overhead light hummed softly above her. She clicked on a link embedded in a small grant proposal. Stranger teaches coding at our school. Thank you for believing we could. It was a grainy video, phone shot, shaky hands, no editing, just raw footage of a classroom in rural Vermont. She almost closed it, until the camera panned, and there he was, Cole Waverly, not in a suit, not behind a podium, in a simple gray t-shirt and faded jeans, standing by a whiteboard smudged with marker ink, kneeling beside a teenage boy who was holding a mouse the wrong way. No big deal, Cole was saying softly. Just turn it this way, there you go. The boy smiled, clicked. The code ran. A tiny robot on the table blinked to life. The class erupted into laughter and cheers, not loud, but full of something pure, joy, and Cole. He didn't look like a CEO. He looked like someone real. Harper leaned in unconsciously. The video continued, capturing moments no one had scripted. Cole showing another student how to troubleshoot a syntax error, high-fiving a girl who had just completed her first if-else function, sitting cross-legged on the floor, answering questions without ego, without agenda. The camera zoomed out once more and caught something written in green marker at the top of the whiteboard. You matter, even when no one's watching. She paused the video, stared at the words. Her heart didn't race. It didn't swell. It simply quieted. Because this wasn't for show. There were no reporters, no investors, no press releases. He didn't know she would see this. He hadn't asked to be forgiven. He hadn't said anything at all. And somehow, that made all the difference. A week later, Harper found herself standing outside a low-roofed school tucked between tall pines in Vermont. She had come under the pretense of visiting another project site. But when the local contact mentioned the school by name Willow Creek High, something in her told her to follow the thread. No plan, no script. Just curiosity. Or maybe something deeper. When she entered the building, the receptionist looked up with a polite smile. Looking for someone, she asked. Harper hesitated. I'm just observing today. Visiting a few initiatives, she replied. The receptionist nodded and gestured toward the left hallway. They're in room 14. Robotics club meets after school. Harper walked slowly, her heels soft on the linoleum floor. The hallway smelled of pencil shavings and cafeteria lasagna. It was deeply unremarkable and profoundly human. She reached the door, peered in. There he was, chalk on his sleeves, hair slightly disheveled, bent over a desk, helping a girl reconnect a circuit board. Let it beep once before you press the second button, he said gently. The girl nodded, trying again. This time, it worked. Harper didn't step in. She just watched. He hadn't seen her, didn't know she was there, and yet he was doing exactly what he had claimed to care about. Helping, quietly, without asking to be noticed, without needing redemption, just doing the work. Harper stepped back before he turned around. She walked down the hallway, out into the crisp afternoon air, and for the first time in a long time, she smiled, not because she was ready, not because she had forgiven, but because trust, she realized, doesn't always begin with words. Sometimes, it begins again in silence, in watching someone become. He wasn't surprised when she showed up. He didn't expect it, but he wasn't surprised either. Cole Waverly had learned not to predict Harper Lennox. Her timing didn't follow clocks. Her decisions didn't follow patterns. She moved by something quieter, something you either respected or lost your chance. She appeared just after the robotics session ended. The classroom had emptied. Wires were unplugged. Laptops closed. Cole was wiping down a whiteboard, the green marker still faintly visible where it read, "You matter," even when no one's watching. When he turned around, she was standing at the door, not dramatic, not smiling, just there. He froze for a second, not out of fear, but because his heart hadn't practiced this moment. "Hey," she said softly. "Just that." "Hey," he replied, setting down the cloth. Silence filled the space between them, but it wasn't tense. It was full of air room to breathe, to not rush. She stepped inside, closed the door behind her, walked to the table where two unfinished robot kits lay side by side. "You always write that line?" she asked, nodding to the board. He followed her eyes, every session. "I changed the color, though." She let out the faintest breath of a laugh. "I saw the video," she said after a pause. Cole's hands went still. "I didn't send it," he said quickly. "I know. I didn't even know it existed until someone forwarded it to me 3 days ago. I figured." Her voice was calm, not accusing. He looked at her then, not just her face, but her presence, the way she stood, the way she didn't rush, the way she was letting this moment unfold without needing control. "You walked away," he said gently, "and I didn't chase you. I noticed. Did it help?" She paused, thought. "It made me wonder if, maybe, you were listening." He nodded. "Slowly, I was," he said. "Still am." She walked toward the window, leaned against the sill, looked out at the forest line beyond the playground. For a long time. She began. "I thought being invisible was the safest way to matter, that if I stayed quiet enough, useful enough, no one could twist it." He didn't interrupt. "I used to think love was a trick people played to get close enough to edit your story," she continued, "and I promised myself no one edits mine again." She turned to face him. "I don't need saving. I don't need building up. And I definitely don't need someone who wants me only when I'm silent and impressive." "I know," Cole said. His voice wasn't defensive, just steady. "I didn't come here to explain," he added. "Not because I don't have answers, but because maybe you don't need them." She didn't respond for a while. Then, walking slowly to the chair beside his, she sat. Their knees didn't touch. Their hands didn't reach. But the air between them softened. "What changed you?" she asked. He thought. Not about the headlines, not about the boardroom. About the boy who turned the mouse the wrong way, about the girl who lit up when her code worked. Failing publicly, he said, wasn't the hardest part. What was failing you, without ever really being given the chance to begin? Harper looked at him, really looked. And for the first time, she didn't see the man from the ballroom, or the headline, or even the one who wrote that quiet letter. She saw a man who had stopped trying to prove himself, a man learning how to just be. Cole leaned back slightly. "I'm not here to ask for another shot," he said. "I just wanted to be someone who, if you ever turned around again, wasn't still standing in the same place." She looked down, then, almost hesitantly, reached forward and touched the edge of the table with her fingertips. "Sometimes," she whispered, "that's all someone really needs." They didn't hug. They didn't make plans. But when Harper stood up to leave, she looked back and said, "I'm not ready. I know. But I'm no longer unwilling." She stepped out into the hallway, and this time, Cole didn't watch her walk away with fear. He watched with hope, because maybe some things didn't end. Maybe they just took the long way home. It was a Tuesday morning when it happened. Not Valentine's Day, not her birthday, not one of those cinematic evenings soaked in candlelight and orchestral swells. Just a Tuesday. The sky was overcast, the air smelled faintly of rain, and the city felt hushed like it was waiting. Harper Lennox stood on the corner of West 18th and Lexington, a canvas bag over her shoulder filled with grant applications, dried lavender peeking from the top. She wasn't planning to see him, but she had texted him 2 days earlier just a single line. "If you're still visiting the library on Tuesdays, I might walk by." No reply, no confirmation, but here she was. She stepped inside. The scent of worn books and wood polish greeted her like an old friend. Children whispered across the story rug. Elderly men folded newspapers, and the world felt gentle. And there he was, Cole Waverly, seated cross-legged in the children's tech corner, surrounded by 3 curious kids and 1 broken laptop. "Try the restart again," he was saying. "Sometimes the trick isn't knowing what to fix, it's knowing when to start over." Harper leaned against the doorframe. She didn't interrupt. She didn't need to. Eventually, Cole looked up. He saw her, and didn't startle, didn't stand abruptly or smile too wide. He just nodded once, as if to say, "I'm glad you came." She walked over, knelt beside him. The children continued working, unfazed by the quiet reunion of 2 grown-ups trying to figure out if life still had enough room for second chances. After the session, they stepped outside together. The sidewalk was damp. A breeze carried the smell of brewing coffee from the cafe down the block. "Do you still think silence is your strongest move?" she asked with a quiet smirk. He shrugged. "It's not a move anymore." She chuckled. They walked in silence for a while this time, not as strangers, not as opponents, just people. When they reached the park, he pointed to a bench beneath a large elm. "Want to sit?" he asked. She nodded. They sat, not shoulder to shoulder, but close enough that breath could travel gently between them. Then he turned toward her, his hands loosely clasped in his lap. "I've been thinking," he said. She raised an eyebrow. "That sounds dangerous." He smiled faintly. "I've spent years building things, structures, systems, teams, money, legacy." She waited. "But I don't know that I've ever built a life." He glanced at her, eyes steady. "I'm not asking you to move in, or to give up anything. I'm not asking for your name next to mine or your silence to fill the spaces I haven't learned to quiet." He paused. "I'm just asking if I can sit beside you, sometimes in the library, in the quiet, while the world spins and we don't have to explain ourselves to anyone." Harper didn't answer right away. She looked down at her hands. Her palms carried small scars, none visible to others, but known well to her. Then she looked at his. No ring, no script, just a hand. Offered, not to rescue, not to own, just to walk beside. "I don't need a ring," she said softly. He nodded. "I didn't bring one. I don't need promises either. I don't have one ready. I don't need fixing. I couldn't even if I tried." She looked at him, really looked. Can you sit in the hard parts, she asked. I've learned to, he replied. Can you stay when it gets quiet again? I'd like to. And when it's not easy, he smiled gently. Nothing worth healing ever is. She took a slow breath, then said the words neither of them had planned for okay. And just like that, something sacred happened. No clapping, no violins, no diamond. Just two people on a weather-worn bench, choosing each other without needing to be saved or changed or celebrated. Choosing. That was the proposal. That was the beginning. They didn't move in together. They didn't post photos with hashtags. They didn't make it official in any public way. There was no announcement, no reveal. But little by little, the world around them changed. It started in the way Harper left a cup of tea on his porch every Sunday morning. She never knocked. She never waited. Just left it there still warm. Sometimes he was home, sometimes he wasn't, but the tea was always taken, and the cup always returned. One morning, he left a note under it. You remembered chamomile this time. Points earned. She smiled when she read it. That week, she brought cookies. They spent their time together in small, deliberate doses. Library afternoons, walks without destination. Shared silences on park benches, where no words were needed to feel understood. Cole never pushed for more. And Harper, for the first time, didn't pull away from less. They didn't fix each other. They didn't complete each other. They simply witnessed one another with honesty and growing ease. Some nights, they'd meet in the garden behind her office, Harper pulling weeds from between herbs, Cole turning soil with a handheld trowel, both quiet in their separate work. It was in that silence they learned how to speak without armor. One evening, after a long day reviewing funding appeals, Harper sat on the stone bench beneath the fig tree and said, I used to think love meant being someone else's safe place. He looked up, hands dirty with soil. She continued, but maybe love is letting someone be their own safe place and still choosing to sit beside them. Cole nodded. Even when there's nothing to fix. Months passed. The world didn't stop for them. There were still deadlines, media noise, staff turnover. Life didn't pause to honor their tenderness, but it didn't crush it either. They learned how to weather storms separately and return. They didn't need to be everything for each other. They just needed to be true. True in the way Cole brought her a set of rare books on early women in finance without a note. True in the way Harper showed up at one of his coding workshops with a bag of supplies for the kids and a shy you probably forgot extra batteries. They learned to laugh again softly, but with more weight than before. And sometimes, when no one else was looking, Harper would place her hand in his, not because she needed support, but because she wanted to share the stillness. Years later, at a quiet fundraiser for literacy in rural Appalachia, an interviewer asked Harper, "How did you learn to trust again?" She smiled, the kind of smile that doesn't belong to a moment, but to a journey. "I didn't," she said. "I learned to notice who was still there when trust was hard." The interviewer blinked, unsure how to respond, but Cole, standing quietly off stage, smiled too, because they had never needed to explain it. They had built something not meant to be understood by headlines or hashtags, a partnership, a quiet, unwavering, imperfect, resilient partnership. One fall afternoon, they sat by a lake in Vermont. The leaves had just started to turn red, copper, fire. The air carried that soft, earthy smell of time passing. Cole tossed a stone into the water. It skipped 3 times, then sank. Harper leaned into his shoulder, her voice almost a whisper. "You never asked me if I loved you." He turned, eyes gentle. "I never needed to," he said. She looked up at him. "But I do." He didn't smile. Not immediately. Instead, he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a folded paper. No ring, no box, just a note. "I don't want to own your future. I want to write beside you." Word by word, quietly, honestly, until we forget what the world thought love was supposed to look like. She read it twice, then tucked it in her coat pocket, and simply said, "Let's keep writing." Sometimes, the most important things in life don't arrive with noise. They come in moments of quiet clarity. This story reminds us that people are more than what they appear to be, and worth is not measured in titles, money, or first impressions. For those of us who have lived long enough to carry regrets, it speaks deeply. It's never too late to listen, to grow, or to choose differently. Cole and Harper's journey shows that healing isn't loud, it's patient. Love doesn't need to be grand, it needs to be true. And trust isn't built overnight. It's earned through presence, through showing up without needing to explain. Perhaps the most powerful lesson is this. We all have the chance to stop proving ourselves and start being ourselves, not to be perfect, but to be honest. Not to win someone, but to walk beside them. And sometimes, the greatest act of love is not to hold tighter, but to make space. Thank you for taking the time to journey with us through this quiet, heartfelt story. If it touched something in you, reminded you of someone, or simply made you pause, please consider giving it a like, sharing it with someone who needs it, and subscribing to our channel. Your support helps us continue telling stories that heal, connect, and inspire. See you in the next one.